Ilara Vance lived by the rhythms of the land. A quiet, almost reclusive existence nestled deep within the Redwood National Park's untamed embrace. Her family had owned the vast, ancient acreage for generations, a legacy of stewardship, rather, than mere possession. At its heart, hidden from every map and hiking trail, lay the Vance Hot Springs, a series of geothermal pools, unique in their mineral composition and the almost otherworldly glow they cast at twilight. They weren't just hot springs. They were a living, breathing part of her ancestry, a place of profound healing and spiritual quietude. The spring Ilara cherished most, the Elder Pool, was a terraced basin carved naturally into the rock face, its waters a translucent cerulean, steaming perpetually with the earth's own warmth. It was here, after long days tending the small, sustainable farm that sustained her, or researching the rare flora endemic to her land, that Ilara found true peace. The Elder Pool was a mirror to her soul, reflecting the quiet strength and fierce protectiveness she held for her inheritance. No one, not even her closest friends, knew its exact location. It was sacred, private, untainted. That fragile peace had begun to fray with the arrival of Brenda Sterling. Brenda had purchased the sprawling, modern monstrosity of a vacation home on the newly subdivided parcel bordering Ilara's northern boundary. The estate was an architectural anomaly, all glass and sharp angles, jarringly out of place amidst the ancient trees. From the moment Brenda's gilded gates swung open, a new kind of friction entered Ilara's world. Brenda was a woman defined by her demands, her conspicuous consumption, and her unyielding belief that anything within her gaze was, by extension, hers for the taking. Initial interactions had been strained. Brenda, clad in designer hiking gear and sporting a permanently pursed expression, had once tried to negotiate for a scenic overlook on Ilara's property, citing her right to unobstructed views. Ilara, polite but firm, had rebuffed her. "This land is private, Miss Sterling. It's not for sale nor for public access." Brenda had merely scoffed, her gaze lingering on the dense, untouched forest beyond Ilara's rustic cabin. "We'll see about that. Everything has a price, dear, and I always get what I want." The veiled threat had chilled Ilara, but she dismissed it as the bluster of an entitled city woman out of her element. She had underestimated Brenda's tenacity, or perhaps her sheer audacity. Rumors, insidious things began to circulate in the nearest small town. Whispers of a hidden hot spring on the Vance property, a legendary pool with rejuvenating properties, a secret oasis. Ilara had always been careful, but somehow the allure of the unknown, coupled with Brenda's relentless probing, had turned a quiet legend into a tantalizing myth. Ilara noticed strange tire tracks on the old logging roads that led deeper into her land, not belonging to the park rangers or the few approved research teams she occasionally hosted. She found broken twigs, flattened patches of moss where no animals had trod, and once a glint of reflective fabric, a piece of a high-tech athletic sock near one of her less used game trails. A knot of dread tightened in her stomach. She reinforced her warning signs, erected motion-activated cameras that fed directly to her secure server, and began making daily, unpredictable patrols of her vast perimeter. The tranquility she once found in her work was now edged with a growing anxiety. One crisp autumn afternoon, as the sun dipped below the towering redwoods, painting the sky in fiery hues, Ilara returned from checking her traps. Her boots crunched softly on the pine needle-strewn path. The air was cool, carrying the scent of damp earth and distant wood smoke. But as she neared the Elder Pool, a scent she knew intimately, the faint, clean sulfur tang of the mineral spring, was overlaid with something alien. Something cloying and artificial, French vanilla and cheap chlorine. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She froze, her hand instinctively going to the small, well-worn Bowie knife she always carried on her hip. The camera feed on her tablet was notoriously slow in this remote patch, dependent on a satellite connection that sometimes lagged. She should have checked it more recently. Slowly, stealthily, she moved through the undergrowth, each step deliberate, her senses on high alert. The sounds of the forest, usually a symphony, were now punctuated by an unwelcome splash, then a muffled sigh of contentment. Ilara gripped the knife, her knuckles white. She broke through the last line of ferns, her breath catching in her throat. There she was. Brenda Sterling. The woman was submerged up to her shoulders in the elder pool, her head tilted back, a grotesque smile plastered across her face. Her usually perfectly coiffed blonde hair was plastered wetly to her scalp, and her face, devoid of its usual mask of expensive makeup, seemed softer, yet more unsettlingly complacent. A garish, floral-patterned swimsuit, utterly out of place, clung to her. On the rock beside the pool lay a discarded plastic water bottle, a high-end waterproof speaker softly playing elevator music, and a small monogrammed towel. Violation. The word screamed in Ilara's mind, drowning out the natural sounds of the evening. It wasn't just trespassing, it was a defilement. This place, her sanctuary, her family's legacy, had been invaded, polluted by the very essence of everything she stood against. The spiritual connection she felt to the elder pool was being severed, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. Brenda Sterling opened her eyes, startled by Ilara's sudden appearance. Her smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of annoyance, then a rapid shift to feigned nonchalance. "Oh, hello," Brenda drawled, her voice dripping with false pleasantness, as if she were surprised to see a fellow spa-goer. "Didn't expect anyone else here. This place is simply divine. Is this your little local secret?" Ilara's voice was a low, dangerous whisper, a stark contrast to the buzzing fury inside her. "Get out of my pool, Ms. Sterling." Brenda merely raised an eyebrow, a dismissive flick of her hand. My, aren't we a bit territorial? There were no signs. And honestly, this land practically screams public park. I mean, look. At it, it's gorgeous. You really ought to consider commercializing this. You'd make a fortune. This is private property, Ilara stated, her voice gaining strength, each word a hammer blow. This pool, this land, belongs to my family. You are trespassing, again. She emphasized the last word, her gaze fixed on the discarded high-tech sock from earlier. Brenda's eyes narrowed. Trespassing? Nonsense. I saw a faint path. It looked abandoned. And frankly, this is far too beautiful to be hoarded by one person. It's selfish, really. People like me pay taxes, you know. We contribute to society. We deserve access to natural wonders like this. She splashed a hand in the water, a deliberate, provocative gesture. Besides, I'm quite comfortable, and the water feels absolutely marvelous. All my little aches are just melting away. I feel lighter. Ilara felt a cold dread creep through her, not just from Brenda's insolence, but from the peculiar light in Brenda's eyes, a strange, almost manic gleam. The elder pool was known for its healing properties, its gentle purification. But there was another rarely spoken of legend among the Vance family. The pool didn't just cleanse the body, it sometimes very subtly amplified the soul. Not in a magical Hollywood sense, but in a deeper, more insidious way. It was said to magnify one's true nature, stripping away pretenses, leaving only the raw essence of who they were. For the kind and pure of heart, it brought profound peace and clarity. For those whose hearts harbored malice, greed, or vanity, it was said to bring something else entirely, a reflection, a mirror, that was far from flattering. You don't understand, Ilara said, her voice strained. This isn't just water. You need to get out. Now. Brenda laughed, a brittle, grating sound that bounced off the ancient trees. Oh, I understand perfectly. You're a little hill person clinging to your precious land while opportunities for wealth just steam away. And you know what? I think I'll stay. I need to get my full 30 minutes for max benefit." She closed her eyes again, a self-satisfied smirk on her face. Ilara's anger burned hotter than the steam rising from the pool. Her gaze swept over the discarded items, then back to Brenda. The woman was radiating a smugness that was almost unbearable. "Fine," Ilara said, her voice eerily calm, the fury now banked beneath a chilling resolve. "Stay, but don't say I didn't warn you." She turned, not walking away, but moving towards the edge of the pool, her eyes scanning the rock formations. There was a faint hum in the air now, a low vibration that only she, attuned to the land, could feel. The elder pool was stirring, not just from Brenda's presence but in response to the violation. Brenda opened one eye, watching Ilara with suspicion. "Warn me about what? Some sort of curse?" "Please, dear, I'm a sophisticated woman. I don't believe in fairy tales." Ilara didn't answer. She knelt beside the pool, near a cluster of glistening, algae-covered stones. Her fingers, nimble and accustomed to the earth, found a loose section of earth. She began to meticulously, slowly, gather a handful of the rich, dark soil from the bank, mixing it with some of the unique, glittering sand that lined the pool's edge, a sand known for its peculiar magnetic properties. Brenda watched, her amusement turning to a flicker of confusion. "What are you doing? Are you going to throw dirt at me?" Her voice was laced with derision, but a hint of unease crept in. Ilara ignored her, her focus absolute. She fashioned the wet earth and sand into a small, crude effigy. Brenda Sterling stumbled through the deepening twilight, the familiar path from the elder pool now a distorted nightmare. Her vision swam, not from exertion, but from the horrifying reflection seared into her mind. Every shadow seemed to mock her. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a whisper condemning her vanity. Her carefully cultivated composure had shattered, replaced by a raw, guttural panic. She couldn't feel her feet beneath her, only the desperate need to escape the silent, judging presence of Ilara and the malevolent mirror of the pool. She clawed her way through the dense underbrush, ignoring the tearing branches and biting insects. That moments ago would have sent her into a fit of outrage. Her breath came in ragged gasps, burning her lungs. The air, once crisp and invigorating, now felt thick with an oppressive weight, as if the ancient redwoods themselves were pressing down on her, condemning her trespass. Finally, she burst out onto a gravel road, one of the old logging trails that snaked haphazardly through Ilara's property. Her Range Rover, a gleaming monument to her urban success, was parked precariously at the edge, hidden just enough from the main county road. She fumbled with the key fob, her hands shaking so violently she could barely grasp it. The interior. Lights flickered on, illuminating her reflection in the rearview mirror. A strangled cry tore from her throat. The face staring back was a grotesque parody of her own. The perfectly plumped lips were thin and drawn, etched with fine lines that deepened around the corners. The smooth, unblemished forehead was now a road map of worry lines, deeply furrowed. Her eyes, once bright and calculating, were sunken, framed by dark circles and crinkled skin. The usually vibrant blonde hair was dull, lifeless, clinging too, her scalp in wet, pathetic strands, revealing patches where it had receded. Her jawline, once sharp and defined, sagged, blurring into her neck. She looked old, decades older. Brenda screamed, a raw, piercing sound that ripped through the quiet forest. She slammed the car into reverse, the tires spitting gravel, and sped down the bumpy track, her mind a whirling vortex of terror and disbelief. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. It was a trick, a hallucination, a nightmare induced by some poisonous gas from the springs, or perhaps Ilara had drugged the water. Yes, That had to be it. That primitive woman, with her archaic beliefs, had poisoned her. She drove maniacally, the expensive SUV jolting and bouncing, her eyes darting to the rearview mirror every few seconds, each glance confirming the horrifying reality. By the time she reached the paved county road, her hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel, her knuckles white. The journey home was a blur. She burst through her own gilded gates, slamming them shut behind her, as if they could keep out the encroaching reality. Her sprawling mansion, usually a beacon of her success, now felt cold, empty, and sterile. She ran through the marble foyer, ignoring the priceless art, and raced upstairs to her master bathroom, a sanctuary of mirrors and imported Italian tiles. She flipped on every light, bathing the room in harsh, unforgiving luminescence. She ripped off her swimsuit, letting it fall in a sodden heap on the floor. Naked, she confronted herself in the full-length mirror. The horror intensified. Her body, once toned and sculpted by expensive trainers, was now ravaged by time. The skin on her arms hung loosely. Her stomach, usually flat, now had soft, sagging folds. Her thighs were dimpled with cellulite she had spent fortunes erasing. Her breasts, once firm and defiant, drooped. Every part of her, from the tips of her discolored toes to the ragged ends of her hair, screamed of age, decay, and neglect. Brenda collapsed onto the cool marble floor, dry heaving, tears streaming down her ravaged face. "No, this isn't me! This isn't me!" she sobbed, pounding her fists on the ground. She pulled out her phone, her trembling fingers barely able to dial. First, her esthetician, then her plastic surgeon, then her dermatologist. Each call was met with confusion, then escalating alarm. "Miss Sterling, are you all right? You sound unwell." Her esthetician, a perpetually perky woman named Tiffany, stammered over the phone. "Your appointment isn't until next Tuesday." "My face, my body, it's aged, it's wrong." Brenda shrieked into the phone. "I need you here, now! Fix me!" Tiffany, after a stunned silence, gently suggested, "Perhaps you should see a doctor, Miss Sterling, a general practitioner." Brenda slammed the phone down, her fury momentarily eclipsing her terror. They didn't believe her. They couldn't see it. Or maybe they could see it, and it was so horrifying they were refusing to acknowledge it. She spent the night in a feverish state, alternately staring at her reflection in horrified disbelief and desperately searching online for obscure illnesses, sudden aging syndromes, anything that could explain this impossible transformation. There was nothing. Every image, every description failed to capture the profound, instantaneous decay she was experiencing. It wasn't a disease, it was a curse. Ilara. It had to be Ilara. The weird dirt, the murmuring words, the way her eyes had glinted with knowing certainty. By morning, Brenda's fury had congealed into a cold, hard resolve. She wouldn't call the police. They would just think she was having a breakdown. No, she would deal with this herself. She would go back. Not to plead, but to demand, to force Ilara to reverse whatever dark magic she had wrought. The next day, under the harsh glare of the morning sun, Brenda donned a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses, desperate to hide her altered features. She still felt the subtle, creeping sensations, a tightness in her joints, an unfamiliar creak in her knees, a persistent dull ache in her lower back. Her muscles, once firm, felt slack and weak. She moved with a slowness that was agonizingly unfamiliar. This wasn't just superficial. It was profound. She drove back to the Vance property, parking her car not at the discreet spot from before, but brazenly at the entrance to Ilara's main drive, blocking it completely. She marched towards the rustic cabin, her heart pounding with a mixture of terror and vengeful rage. Ilara was on her porch, tending to a small herb garden, her movements fluid and serene. She looked up as Brenda approached, her eyes calm, betraying. "No surprise! You!" Brenda spat, ripping off her sunglasses, her voice raw with indignation. Look at me! Look at what you did! Ilara rose slowly, her gaze sweeping over Brenda's face, then her trembling hands. The pool reflects, Ms. Sterling. It doesn't create. Don't give me that mumbo-jumbo, Brenda shrieked, advancing up the steps, her voice cracking with emotion. You put some sort of spell on me. You poisoned me. You're a witch. I am a guardian, Ilara corrected calmly, stepping off the porch to meet Brenda on the small dirt path. And the elder pool judges those who defile it. You took what was not yours. You brought your entitlement and your disrespect into a place of sacred healing. It merely showed you your true self. My true self? Brenda laughed, a bitter, hysterical sound. My true self is a successful, beautiful woman, not this. She gestured wildly at herself. You have to. Reverse it. You have to fix me. I'll pay you. Anything. $1 million. $2 million. Ilara shook her head. Money means nothing here, Brenda, and there's nothing to reverse. The pool showed you what was already there beneath the artifice. You sought perfection outside, but ignored the decay within. That's what's manifesting. This is insanity, Brenda screamed, her voice hoarse. I'm calling the authorities. I'll have you arrested. I'll have this whole forest burned down. I'll sue you for everything you own, you pathetic little hermit. Ilara's calm facade cracked. Her eyes hardened, reflecting the ancient strength of the land around them. You threaten fire, Brenda? On this land? You threaten legal action against a legacy that predates your family's entire existence? You don't understand. This land protects itself. The pool protects itself. As if on cue, a sudden sharp gust of wind swept through the clearing, not a gentle breeze, but a violent whipping force that tore through the trees. Dust and dry leaves swirled around them, stinging Brenda's eyes. The air grew heavy, charged with an almost palpable energy. A distant rumble of thunder echoed through the mountains, though the sky above was clear. Brenda staggered backward, shielding her face. What? What was that? Ilara's voice, though still quiet, carried an undeniable power. This land has seen invaders come and go for centuries. It has endured logging, fires, greed, and it has always found a way to reclaim its balance. You are not its first challenge, nor will you be its last. Brenda, shaken but not deterred, stumbled forward again. I demand you take me back to that pool. I demand you do whatever you did again, but this time, make it fix me. Make me beautiful again. Her desperation was palpable, clinging to her like a shroud. Ilara looked at her with a mix of weariness and resolution. You think more of the same will bring a different result? The pool is not a magic fountain of youth, Brenda. It's a mirror. And right now, all it shows you is the truth you've spent a lifetime avoiding. Brenda lunged, her intent clear, to physically force Ilara to somehow drag her back to the springs. But her movements were clumsy, slowed by the sudden frailty of her body. Ilara, agile and rooted to the earth, easily sidestepped her. Brenda tripped on an exposed root, falling heavily to the ground, a cry of pain escaping her lips. Her elbow scraped against the sharp gravel, drawing blood. My arm, she wailed, clutching it, tears of genuine pain now mingling with her tears of rage. She looked at her. The Sterling mansion, usually a beacon of meticulously curated luxury, became a gilded cage for Brenda. She moved through its opulent rooms like a ghost, her reflection in every polished surface, every pane of glass, a constant horrifying reminder of her transformation. Richard had arrived that evening, not alone, but with Dr. Albright, a man whose gentle demeanor belied a steel-trap mind trained in the nuances of psychiatric evaluation. The consultation had been excruciating. Brenda, stripped bare of her usual bravado, laid out her story, tears streaming down her aged face, pointing frantically at her withered skin, her dull hair, her trembling hands. Richard, seated beside Dr. Albright, maintained a stoic, unreadable expression. Dr. Albright, for his part, listened intently, nodding occasionally, making discreet notes. He performed a series of basic neurological and physical examinations, his touch gentle but probing. "Brenda, darling," Richard had said, his voice laced with a concern that felt more like pity, "Dr. Albright is suggesting a period of rest, away from this environment. Perhaps a specialized clinic where you can relax and receive the best possible care." Brenda had known instantly what that meant. A mental institution. They thought she was mad. "I am not crazy," she shrieked, scrambling back from them, a cornered animal. "It was the pool! That woman, Ilara Vance! She did this to me!" Dr. Albright cleared his throat. "Brenda, while your symptoms are certainly unusual, there's no medical explanation for such rapid aging. My professional opinion, based on your current agitated state and the fantastical nature of your claims, is that you are experiencing an acute stress-induced psychotic episode. A short stay at our facility would allow us to monitor you, run comprehensive tests, and ensure you get the medication you need." Brenda looked at Richard, desperation raw in her eyes. "Richard, you can't let them do this! You saw me yesterday! You know I'm not lying!" Richard met her gaze, his eyes cool and distant. "Brenda, I saw what the security cameras showed. You left perfectly well. You returned, distressed, and you're making claims that simply defy reality. For your own good, and to prevent any unnecessary public attention, this is the best course of action." Brenda's world collapsed. The fear of aging, of losing her beauty, was now compounded by the terror of losing her freedom, her sanity, her very identity as a capable, rational woman. She was trapped, her own husband conspiring with a doctor to institutionalize her. Thuther. Next morning, 2 burly orderlies, dressed in crisp white, arrived. Brenda fought, clawed, screamed, but her aged body was no match for their strength. Richard watched from the sidelines, his face a mask of polite regret, as Brenda was gently but firmly escorted out of her own home. As she was led away, she caught sight of her reflection in the glass of the front door. A gaunt, terrified old woman, and a bitter, hollow laugh escaped her lips. The elder Poole's justice was crueler than she could have imagined. It wasn't just physical, it was psychological, social, utterly isolating. Meanwhile, Ilara Vance felt the disturbance. Not a physical tremor, but a subtle shift in the spiritual energy of her land. It was like a chord had been struck, a resonant frequency that hummed beneath the earth. She knew Brenda had been taken away. She felt no triumph, only a deep sadness for the woman's self-inflicted torment, and a renewed sense of responsibility for the sacred trust placed upon her family. She spent the days reinforcing her perimeter, setting up more discreet sensors, and establishing a silent, almost invisible network of warning systems. She knew Richard Sterling would not let this lie. A man like him, used to controlling every variable, would not accept the inexplicable. He would not stop until he found an answer. And in his world, answers were quantifiable, provable, and, if necessary, enforceable. Ilara also dedicated more time to the elder Poole. She performed ancient cleansing rituals, offering prayers to the land, trying to restore the tranquility Brenda had disrupted. She spent hours in meditation by its side, the scent of earth and warm minerals filling her lungs, grounding her. She knew the pool had acted on its own, a self-defense mechanism, a reflection of violated sanctity. But she also knew that such powerful reactions could leave residual ripples. One evening, as the moon cast long, silvery shadows through the redwoods, Ilara detected something. Not on her immediate perimeter, but a faint, almost imperceptible digital signal from the southeastern boundary of her property. It was too precise for a wildlife tracker, too persistent for a lone hiker's GPS. This was something industrial, something designed to map and penetrate. She retrieved her long-range thermal monocular and crept through the dense forest, moving like a phantom. She found them then. A team of 4 men dressed in tactical gear, moving with professional precision. They weren't tourists or random trespassers, they were specialists. They were setting up advanced surveying equipment, their laser beams slicing through the darkness, their movements silent and efficient. One of them held a large, detailed map, illuminated by a small shielded light. Ilara's heart seized. It wasn't just any map. It was a topographic survey of her land, marked with grids, elevations, and unmistakably a prominent X in the precise location of the Elder Pool. Richard Sterling was not sending doctors. He was sending an invasion. He wasn't trying to cure Brenda. He was trying to dissect the source of her delusion. Ilara watched them for hours, meticulously observing their patterns, their equipment, their communications. They were not looking for Brenda. They were looking for the pool. They were looking for the truth Brenda had spoken, but for reasons of scientific exploitation, not spiritual understanding. They sought to extract, to analyze, to monetize, and that, Ilara knew, was a far greater trespass than Brenda's desperate swim. The next morning, Ilara contacted her family lawyer, an old, grizzled man named Arthur Finch, who had represented the Vance family for decades. He understood the unique nature of their land and their fierce privacy. "Arthur," Ilara said, her voice grim, "I need you to prepare a legal offensive. We have confirmed a systematic intrusion onto our property. It's not just casual trespassers anymore. It's a professional team. They're surveying the land, specifically targeting the hot springs." Arthur grunted. "Thought as much. Sterling, eh? Man's a shark. Doesn't like loose ends. Probably thinks your hot springs are some secret geological anomaly that'll make him another billion. What proof do you have?" Ilara outlined the motion sensors, the specific mapping equipment she'd observed, and the marked map. Arthur listened, his silence a testament to the gravity of the situation. "Right then," he finally said, his voice hardening. "This moves beyond simple trespass. This is corporate espionage, potentially land theft. I'll file for a temporary restraining order against Richard Sterling and any entities associated with him immediately. We'll also demand an injunction to cease all surveying activities and declare the data collected as illegally obtained. This won't be a quiet affair, Ilara. Sterling fights dirty. He'll try to paint you as a paranoid recluse, an obstacle to progress, or worse." Ilara didn't flinch. "Let him! This land has seen worse. We will fight!" The legal battle began swiftly, a flurry of court filings and counter-filings that quickly escalated from local county court to federal district court. Richard Sterling responded with overwhelming force, hiring a battery of high-priced lawyers, inundating Ilara's small legal team with motions, depositions, and demands for discovery. He filed a countersuit, claiming harassment, defamation, and obstruction of private enterprise, subtly weaving in veiled accusations of Ilara's unstable mental state to discredit her. He even attempted to challenge the historical land. Deeds claiming ancestral claims were tenuous without modern surveys. The media, always hungry for a sensational story, caught wind of the escalating billionaire versus hermit land dispute. Local news channels ran segments, casting Ilara as an eccentric who was holding back progress, while national tabloids hinted at a hidden geological marvel and a reclusive family guarding a mythical secret. The pressure mounted daily, threatening to erode Ilara's quiet life, forcing her into the spotlight she so desperately avoided. One afternoon, a court order arrived, demanding Ilara allow a neutral, court-appointed geological survey of her property to verify the existence and nature of the hot springs, citing public interest and fair assessment in the ongoing dispute. It was a thinly veiled attempt by Sterling to gain access under legal guise. Ilara read the document, her hands tightening into fists. They wanted to expose her sanctuary, to strip away its mystery, to reduce it to geological data points. But she also saw the trap, refuse, and she'd be held in contempt, further cementing Richard's narrative of a paranoid recluse. She knew what she had to do. She couldn't stop them from surveying, but she could control what they found, and she could control what they understood. She walked towards the elder pool, the afternoon sun dappling through the canopy above. The pool shimmered, its steam rising in lazy curls. She carried a small, leather-bound journal, her grandmother's, filled with observations, local lore, and ancient wisdom about the land. She sat by the pool's edge, opened the journal, and began to read aloud, not words of power, but words of understanding, of the delicate balance that existed here, the subtle energies, the inherent protectiveness of the earth itself. She was preparing the pool, not for an attack. The silence that followed the helicopter's catastrophic plunge was more deafening than the crash itself. Dust and the acrid smell of burnt fuel hung heavy in the air. Richard Sterling, his immaculately tailored suit now dusted with earth, stood, transfixed, his face a mask of disbelief. Around him, the geological team, initially stunned, began to stir, their professional pragmatism battling with the sheer impossibility of what had just occurred. Dr. Anya Sharma, the lead geologist, was the first to react, pulling out her satellite phone, her movements jerky. "Mayday! Mayday! We have a downed aircraft! Coordinates!" Her voice trailed off as she struggled to relay their precise location, her eyes darting between Richard and the smoldering wreckage in the distance. Richard, however, wasn't thinking of rescue. He was thinking of control, of damage. His mind, accustomed to immediate problem-solving through influence and money, raced. A helicopter crash on a private, contested property during a court-ordered survey? This wasn't just a setback. It was a public relations nightmare of monumental proportions. And the way it had just happened, the sudden, inexplicable failure, the feeling of the earth itself vibrating, it defied all logic, all science, everything he believed in. "No calls," Richard commanded, his voice hoarse, regaining a semblance of his usual authority. "Not yet. We assess. We control the narrative." He turned to his security detail, grim-faced. "Secure the perimeter. No one in, no one out. And especially, no photographs." The security guards, seasoned professionals, moved quickly, cordoning off the area. Dr. Sharma, however, bristled. "Mr. Sterling, this is a serious accident. We have a moral and legal obligation to report this immediately. There could be survivors. And what about the data? My equipment just went haywire. There are anomalous readings all over the place." She gestured wildly at her flickering instruments, which continued to display chaotic patterns, despite the helicopter's silence. Richard's gaze hardened. "The pilot was a former military, highly trained. He wouldn't have made a mistake. And your equipment, Doctor, is likely experiencing interference from the electromagnetic activity common in this region." He dismissed her concerns with a wave of his hand, a lie forming easily on his lips. "Mechanical failure. That will be the official report. And as for your anomalous readings, they will be attributed to faulty sensors. I will compensate you generously for your discretion, Doctor." Sharma stared at him, her scientific integrity warring with the unspoken threat in his voice and the immense power he wielded. She looked at her team, their faces pale, equally shaken. They were professionals, yes, but also employees. And Richard Sterling had a long reach. Slowly, reluctantly, she nodded, pulling her hand away from the phone. As Richard worked to contain the immediate fallout, Ilara watched from a hidden vantage point, a somber witness to the chaos. The land had spoken. It had defended itself, not with violence, but with a visceral demonstration of its power, a power that transcended human understanding and technology. She knew, however, that Richard Sterling would not interpret this as a warning to retreat. He would see it as a challenge, an obstacle to be brutally overcome, and he would escalate. In the sterile, fluorescent-lit confines of the exclusive clinic, Brenda Sterling was a prisoner of her own body and mind. The initial panic had given way to a deep, gnawing despair. The doctors and nurses, all impeccably polite, treated her with a condescending patience, attributing her every protest, every desperate plea for belief, to her condition. They administered a cocktail of sedatives and antipsychotics, aiming to quell her delusions. But the drugs couldn't erase the physical reality. Every morning, she woke to the same horrifying visage in the mirror. Her skin continued to thin, her hair to fall out in clumps, her joints to ache with a profound, bone-deep weariness. The medical staff noted her rapid physical deterioration with clinical detachment, attributing it to the stress-induced psychosis manifesting somatically. They ran endless tests, blood work, brain scans, genetic screenings, all of which came back frustratingly normal, deepening their conviction that her ailments were purely psychological. "Brenda, we understand this is difficult," Dr. Albright would say, his voice smooth and empathetic. "But your body is simply reacting to the immense psychological trauma you're experiencing. The mind is a powerful thing. Perhaps if you could just accept that these changes are a manifestation of your internal distress, we can begin to work on recovery." Brenda would scream then, or weep silently, or simply stare blankly ahead, her spirit slowly being crushed. She tried to contact Richard, but her calls were screened, her letters intercepted. She was utterly cut off, her credibility meticulously dismantled. One young nurse, a compassionate woman named Maria, began to notice small discrepancies. Brenda, despite her delusions, often spoke with a raw clarity about Alara and the pool. Maria saw the medical charts that showed no physiological cause for Brenda's rapid aging, yet the evidence was undeniable. Brenda looked decades older than her documented age. Maria, a local from a small town near the Redwoods, had heard whispers, old tales, of the Vance family and their hidden springs, stories dismissed as folklore. But seeing Brenda, Maria felt a prickle of doubt. What if it wasn't delusion? What if it was true? Maria began to surreptitiously bring Brenda articles about unexplained aging phenomena, geological anomalies, and even ancient cultural beliefs about sacred places. She smuggled in a small, old-fashioned mirror, not the highly reflective, distorting ones in the clinic, but one with a softer, truer reflection. Brenda, seeing her true aged self without the harsh clinic lights, crumbled. But Maria also saw a spark of something else. A fragile thread of understanding, a connection to the very thing that had transformed her. The pool. "It reflected me," Brenda whispered one day, her voice raspy, no longer in a fit of rage but in quiet, agonizing realization. "It showed me what I truly was, inside." Maria said nothing, just squeezed Brenda's hand, a silent acknowledgement of a truth that defied medical science. For the first time, Brenda felt a flicker of genuine connection, a faint glimmer of hope that someone, somewhere, believed her. Back at his sprawling estate, Richard Sterling was a man consumed. The helicopter crash, while successfully covered up as a tragic mechanical failure, with the pilot taking the full blame, was a humiliation. The media had been bought off, the geologists silenced, and the wreckage discreetly removed. But the lingering image of the elder pool, pulsating with an unseen force, haunted him. He knew deep down that Alara Vance was connected to it, that she wielded something he couldn't buy, couldn't seize, couldn't even comprehend. His usual methods had failed. Money, lawyers, scientific surveys, all had proven useless against an adversary that seemed to draw power from the very earth itself. He couldn't acquire the land through legal means. Alara and her lawyer, Arthur Finch, were too formidable, and the court case was dragging on, costing him millions and generating unwanted scrutiny. He couldn't destroy it publicly, not without risking his entire empire. There was only one option: left, illicit, direct, ruthless. Richard began to make discreet calls. Not to lawyers, but to men who operated in the shadows. Ex-military contractors, specialists in asset recovery and site neutralization in difficult territories. Men who asked no questions beyond the objective and the payment. He wanted the hot springs. Or, failing that, he wanted them rendered inert, a dry, lifeless hole in the ground. He met with a grim-faced individual named Kestrel, a man with cold, unblinking eyes and a reputation for absolute efficiency. Kestrel listened to Richard's fantastical story of the anomalous hot springs and the uncooperative property owner without a flicker of surprise, merely jotting down notes on a small pad. "You want the property cleared," Kestrel stated, his voice flat. "And the anomaly contained or neutralized permanently." Richard nodded. "Whatever it takes, and I want the guardian removed. She's an impediment." He gestured vaguely, his stomach churning at the thought of what he was commissioning, yet his resolve unyielding. He had to restore order, restore his sense of control. And Brenda's condition was a constant, public reminder of his failure. Kestrel quoted a price that made even Richard Sterling's eyes widen, but he paid it without hesitation. The plan was meticulous. A small, highly trained team would infiltrate the property under the cover of darkness, bypass Ilara's primitive security, neutralize her, and then deploy a specialized geological agent to solidify or redirect the geothermal flow, effectively killing the hot springs. It would look like a natural geological shift, an unfortunate drying up of a local legend. Weeks passed. Ilara felt the shift in the wind, the deepening quiet of the forest before a storm. The legal battle with Richard had gone strangely silent. The flurry of filings replaced by an unnerving lull. This, she knew, was a far more dangerous sign than open hostilities. It meant Richard was planning something off the books, something he didn't want exposed to the light of day. She spent her days fortifying her cabin, not with weapons, but with the wisdom of her ancestors. She laid down protective circles of stones, infused the land with her prayers, and walked its boundaries, her presence a silent shield. She installed more advanced military-grade thermal sensors, their feeds routed to a secure, independent server that bypassed Richard's surveilla. Richard Sterling sat in the darkened interior of his remote monitoring van, the console flickering with dead screens, the silence on the comms a chilling testament to the void. His entire mercenary team, Kestrel, Tank, the others, gone. Swallowed by the earth. He replayed the last chaotic seconds in his mind, the primal roar, the screams, the sickening thuds, the utterly impossible visual distortion on his night vision feed. It wasn't a mechanical failure, it wasn't electromagnetic interference. It was the land, Ilara Vance's land. And it was alive. For the first time in his life, Richard Sterling felt true, unadulterated fear, not the fear of financial ruin or public scandal, but the primordial terror of facing something utterly beyond his control, beyond his comprehension. His meticulously constructed world of quantifiable assets and manageable risks had been shattered by an ancient, visceral power. He, a man who had built an empire on bending the world to his will, was now confronted by a force that bent reality itself. He tried Kestrel's calm again, his voice cracking, desperate. "Kestrel, report! Kestrel!" Only static answered him. The realization fully dawned. They were dead. All of them. And he was responsible. The sheer, unimaginable cost, not just in money but in human lives, weighed on him. His ruthlessness had collided with something unbreakable, and it had obliterated his instruments of power. He stumbled out of the van, the crisp night air doing little to clear the fog of terror from his mind. The redwoods loomed around him, silent. and immense, now seeming to watch him with ancient, knowing eyes. Every shadow held a potential threat. Every rustle of leaves sounded like a whisper of judgment. He climbed back into his armored SUV, his hands trembling so violently he could barely insert the key. He didn't drive. He fled, leaving the van, the useless equipment, and the horrifying silence behind him. At the clinic, Maria, the compassionate nurse, had a plan. She had watched Brenda's slow, agonizing transformation from denial to a fragile acceptance. Brenda no longer screamed about curses. She spoke softly of reflection, of what the pool had shown her. Maria knew Brenda couldn't. Stay here. The clinic was only exacerbating her torment, trying to medicate away a truth they refused to acknowledge. That night, Maria waited until her shift ended. She then slipped back into Brenda's room, not in uniform, but in plain clothes. "Brenda," she whispered, her voice urgent. "They're going to transfer you to a higher security unit. They think you're getting worse. I can help you get out, but you have to trust me, and you have to be ready to face the outside world as you are." Brenda, her eyes sunken but clear, gripped Maria's hand. "I trust you, Maria. I'm ready. I have to go back. Not to fight, but to understand." Under the cover of darkness, Maria disabled a few security cameras, bypassed a rarely used exit, and guided Brenda through the labyrinthine halls. Brenda, though physically frail, moved with a newfound determination. They slipped out into the chilly night, a borrowed jacket doing little to hide Brenda's gaunt frame. Maria had a small, beat-up car waiting, packed with a bag of essentials: food, water, a warm blanket, and the old mirror. "Where are we going?" Brenda asked, her voice surprisingly steady. Maria looked at her, her eyes filled with a quiet resolve. "Somewhere I think you need to be, where the air is clean and the earth tells its own stories. We're going to the Redwoods, Brenda, to Alara Vance." Brenda didn't flinch. She simply nodded, her gaze fixed on the road ahead, a strange mix of apprehension and yearning in her expression. The journey was long and arduous for Brenda's aged body, but her spirit, unburdened by the sedatives and the constant invalidation, felt lighter than it had in years. She looked at her reflection in the small mirror Maria had given her. The old woman stared back, yes, but for the first time, Brenda saw not just decay, but the raw honesty of time, a tapestry of experiences etched onto her skin. The relentless pursuit of external perfection had masked an emptiness within. Now, stripped bare, she felt a profound, if painful, sense of peace. She was no longer fighting the image. She was beginning to accept the woman within it. Richard Sterling arrived at his mansion in the pre-dawn hours, his mind a wasteland of fear and rage. He found his security chief, a burly man named Grant, waiting for him, his face grim. "Mr. Sterling, the team, we've lost all contact," Grant reported, his voice low. "No GPS, no comms. The last audio was a lot of noise and screams." Richard slammed his fist on the polished marble table, a sound of impotent fury. "I know! I was monitoring! They're gone, Grant! All of them! That woman! That land! It killed them!" Grant, a man of facts and combat, stared at him, bewildered. "Killed them, sir? With what? A landslide?" Richard laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "No landslide! The earth itself swallowed them! The hot springs! It roared! It opened up and consumed them!" He was teetering on the edge, his carefully constructed reality crumbling around him. Grant, seeing the raw terror in his boss's eyes and the desperation in his voice, began to suspect what the doctors had concluded about Brenda. His boss was having a breakdown. "Sir, I suggest you get some rest," Grant said cautiously. "We'll send a search and rescue team at first light. We'll find out what happened." But Richard wasn't listening. He was pacing, his eyes wild. No, no more teams, no more helicopters. It wants to be left alone. It wants her. He pointed vaguely in the direction of the redwoods. She's connected to it. She's protecting it. His phone rang. It was his lawyer, Arthur Finch, Alara's counsel. Richard answered, his voice a snarl. What do you want, Finch? I'm not in the mood for legal games. Arthur's voice was calm, almost unnervingly so. Mr. Sterling, I'm calling to inform you that we have definitive proof of your illegal incursions onto Ms. Vance's property. Satellite imagery of your monitoring station, thermal scans of your mercenary team, and quite frankly, the highly unusual and tragic disappearance of said team. The court will be made aware of everything, and we will be filing charges of corporate espionage, attempted ecological sabotage, and potentially conspiracy to commit harm. Richard's blood ran cold. He had been so focused on the esoteric threat. He had forgotten the very real, legal consequences of his actions. Alara hadn't just survived, she had gathered evidence. She had outsmarted him in his own game. You can't prove any of that, Richard blustered, but his voice lacked conviction. Oh, we can, Arthur replied, his voice firm. Ms. Vance is very thorough, and the land seems to leave its own marks. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Sterling? The line went dead. Richard stared at the phone, his face draining of color. He was ruined, publicly disgraced, legally entangled, and haunted by an incomprehensible force that had wiped out his best men. His empire, built on control and acquisition, was teetering on the brink of collapse. Maria's car pulled up to the edge of Alara's property just as dawn broke. Brenda, exhausted but resolute, stepped out. The air was cool and crisp, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth. Maria hugged her. Good luck, Brenda. I hope you find what you're looking for. Brenda nodded, then began to walk, slowly, but purposefully towards Alara's cabin. Alara was waiting on her porch, as if she had known Brenda would come. Her eyes, calm and knowing, met Brenda's. There was no anger, no triumph, only a quiet understanding. Brenda stopped before her, her aged face softened by humility, her former arrogance completely stripped away. She looked down at her hands, then back at Alara. The pool, she began, her voice hoarse but steady. It reflected me, everything, my vanity, my greed, my emptiness. She looked up, tears welling in her eyes, but these were tears of release, not despair. I was so lost. Thank you for showing me. Alara merely nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile touching her lips. The pool does not judge, Brenda. It only reveals. What you do with that truth is up to you. At that moment, the drone of approaching vehicles grew louder, not just one, but many. Police sirens wailed in the distance. Richard Sterling, his face pale and haggard, emerged from the first police cruiser, flanked by officers, a grim-faced Arthur Finch observing from a respectful distance. Richard's eyes, devoid of their usual fire, darted between Brenda and Alara. His empire was crumbling, his wife was a ghost of her former self, and he was facing legal ruin. The land had won. He saw Brenda, saw her aged face, and a fresh wave of despair washed over him. He was losing everything. Alara Vance, an officer said, approaching the cabin. We have a warrant for your property, and Mr. Sterling has made several grave accusations. Alara stepped forward, her gaze unflinching. I welcome the investigation, but I warn you, officer, this land protects itself, and sometimes its truth is not what you expect. She looked at Richard, then at Brenda, and a flicker of irony passed through her eyes. Justice, after all, often takes an unexpected form. The police, under legal obligation, began their search, but they found no bodies, no trace of the mercenaries, only pristine, ancient forest. The elder pool hummed softly, an innocent, beautiful oasis. Richard Sterling's accusations of a supernatural force were met with polite skepticism and concerned glances amongst the officers. His public image, already tarnished, would soon be irrevocably shattered, leaving him to battle not a reclusive woman, but the crushing weight of his own hubris, his own losses, and the silent, undeniable truth of the land's power, a power he had foolishly dared to challenge. The Elder Pool H.